this program that I've developed, this workshop, is a two-part piece. One is I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about a research project that I did involving past life regression and soul writing. And you should have received in your packets, or those of you that are online download, a handout. Looks like this. This is just helpful information for you later on, but also on the very last page, there is space for you to do the writing this at the end of this session. So, or you could write in your journals, you don't have to write on this, but I just wanted you to know that it's there for you. So I will share my screen with you and we'll get going. And at the end of the first part of the presentation, I'll stop for questions before we go into the soul writing. Okay, here we go. Magical Mystery Tour. Okay, can you all see that? Okay. Well, since I was a teenager, I've been fascinated by the whole concept of reincarnation. And the very first book that I read, and I know Diane was talking about how she's dated herself. I'm going to date myself even before her to let you know that the first book I read was The Search for Bridie Murphy. That came out, I think, in the late 50s or somewhere around there. I didn't read it till the 60s, but that just shows you how old I was. After that, I started reading everything I could on the subject of reincarnation. And then in 1987, when Shirley MacLaine's groundbreaking book Out on a Limb became a mini-series, I began to pursue past life research with really great passion. It became almost all-consuming for me. That was the year. If anybody has a watershed year in their life, for me, 1987 was it, because Shirley MacLaine had this incredible mini-series that came out in January of 1987 on ABC. I think it was 2 nights. And it was like the big wake-up call for a lot of sleeping metaphysicians like myself. And after that, that was it. It was like the turning point. That year, I joined the Edgar Cayce's ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment, and I sort of never looked back. But being the overachiever that I am, and because I was so excited about the whole idea about reincarnation, having grown up Catholic, and this answered all my questions that Catholicism surely did not, I decided I would form my own past life research organization that I called Plexus. Plexus stood for Past Life Exploration, Understanding, and Sharing. At the time, I was living in Naperville, Illinois, outside of Chicago. And so I found a place where we could have monthly get-togethers. And I was simultaneously, the ARE was forming regions all through the country. And so I was part of the Heartland region, which was based in Chicago. It took in like 6 states. We had like 5,000-6,000 members. And so the ARE would bring in speakers who were experts in the field of reincarnation. So I would then ask them, well, while you're in Chicago, would you come and speak to my group for Plexus? And they said they would, and it was just wonderful. We had one great speaker after the other, and it started to grow, and to the point where I was doing professional journals with it. And my whole goal was to create an organization in which past life research and therapy was taken seriously, and that it was totally above board, and that only really, credible professionals were involved with the work that we were doing. So one of the guest speakers that I had, his name was David Rowell. Now, David was a very talented channeler. And those of you who saw Out on a Limb or read the book know that Shirley MacLaine worked with Kevin Ryerson, another very talented channeler. But there were also a lot of, at that time in the late 80s, there were a lot of people that were coming out that said they were doing channeling, and it was sort of iffy whether they really were or not. But David passed my test. I was like the Houdini of the past life world. And I was, trying to trip him up when I would ask him questions about my own past life journey. And he answered them every time. Now, David channeled an entity that he called Dr. Fredericks. Dr. Fredericks was an Akashic librarian, which meant that he could go to the Akashic records and he could pull your book and read it to you. So at one point, I knew I had a life in 1773. I asked him to pull the book, to pull that and read it to me, and he did. So that's how I knew that he knew his stuff. Well, anyway, what we would do when Dr. Fred would come is we would sit in a circle and we would ask him questions. And so there was one time when I was thinking, well, what in the world am I going to ask him? And then I thought, I'm really so passionate about past life work, but everything I read was the same old, same old. There was nothing new going on. So, so I had to ask him, so Dr. Fred, is there anything new in past life work? And he said, there is, you just haven't written about it yet. Now that was quite a challenge to be told that. I thought, what in the world is he talking about? And it took me quite a while because he wouldn't spoon feed the answer to me. I didn't know what he was saying. I'm asking him, is there anything new? And he's saying, yeah, there is, but you haven't written about it yet. Okay, there's something coming up, something big coming up. And what that big coming up was actually my introduction to soul writing. Now, what is soul writing? I think most of you know who Edgar Cayce is, but if those of you who don't know who he is, he was like the most renowned and gifted psychic of the 20th century. He was based in Virginia Beach. He gave over 14,000 readings. 12,000 of those were health readings. That earned him the title of Father of Holistic Medicine. I consider Edgar Cayce my mentor, my teacher. I've studied the Cayce readings since 1987, and I have never found him to be wrong. Especially where the subject of reincarnation comes up. But Cayce used a term called inspirational writing. At the time, I didn't know what. I mean, I was doing some writing while in an altered state of consciousness, but I didn't know what it was called. I thought it was automatic writing, and I'm going to show you why it wasn't. But anyway, he called it inspirational writing. Later on, many years later, when I went to get my master's in transpersonal psychology through Atlantic University, this was my thesis. My thesis was on inspirational writing. I ended up calling it soul writing because when I was doing my research, all the books on inspirational writing, if you type inspirational writing into Amazon, you're going to get all Christian genre books. If you type in automatic writing, you're going to get all occult books. So I thought, well, neither one of those is the way Cayce intended it to be. So I thought, well, what is this writing? And I thought, well, it's a written form of meditation. So it's writing in an altered state of consciousness and getting that information from a much higher source, channeling that through you, through your soul, out your arm and down on the paper. The fabulous thing about soul writing is that you can get answers to any questions that you pose. It's like having a 24/7 hotline to the universe. And you can pose any question you want and you will always, always, always get an answer. If you want a visual, I like this visual because I sometimes think this is what it's like. You watch these telethons and there's these tables and tables of banks of phones, and the people there are just kind of sitting around, they're waiting, like, is somebody going to call? Sometimes I think our guides are doing that. It's like we have guides available to us all the time, and they're there to offer us help in any area of our lives, but we don't check in with them very often. So soul writing is a way to do just that. So I decided to form a research project around soul writing and whether soul writing was something that I could attach to past life work. That was the something new. All of my books, by the way, are based on a research project. I don't really write anything that's just me pontificating about a particular subject that I'm interested in. I want to have other people tell their stories, and I want to have backup data to substantiate what it is that I'm writing about. So for this particular research project, which has been, look how long it's been, Lord, 10 years already. I had 50 volunteers. I never have a problem getting volunteers because I've got a network from ARE and from other organizations, metaphysical and otherwise. So I had 43 women and 7 men. That's pretty much the case, the division between men and women who participate in these types of projects. They ranged in age from 23 to 81. They went from Pompeii, 79 AD, to the Holocaust. So they were covering almost 2,000 years. 17 of those 50 never had a past life regression before. But 88% said that the session impacted their life in some way. And 76% said that it was the soul writing portion that explained, expanded, or clarified the information that they received in the regression. That's an important aspect of why this work is so important when attached to past life work, because it gives you the ability to go a little deeper and get questions answered. Sometimes it'll give you the backstory. Sometimes it'll tell you, you'll say to yourself, well, this is all well and good that I know all of this about my past life. What am I supposed to do with it now? Well, the soul writing can help you to identify how to apply it to your life now. Or if you have a question about it. Sometimes with the regressions, some people don't get very much information. You know, I've had clients who cannot tell me anything about their biological families. They don't know where they came from. They don't know if they had any siblings. They don't know if they even had any friends in that life. And so sometimes we can go in there with the soul writing and we could dig a little deeper and get that information. Now, it's really important to differentiate between soul writing and its better known counterpart, which is automatic writing. A lot of people use the term automatic writing. I did for many, many years. The interesting thing about this is in 1990, I went to a ARE conference in Chicago. I think it was called Becoming Your Own Psychic or something like that, or How to Be a Psychic, I don't know. But Dr. Henry Reed, who is another one of my mentors, he'd been around ARE for a long time. He was talking about inspirational writing, and he gave out a pamphlet. That was the first time that I even knew that there was such a thing as inspirational writing versus automatic writing. But they also gave out a book, and it was a book that ARE was listing the top no-nos for developing your psychic abilities. And automatic writing was number 1, no. Number 2 was Ouija boards. And I was doing both. I mean, you know, I would say, because I didn't know any better. This is what happens when you first start out with this. You just sort of, you're like a little sponge and you're just absorbing, but you're not taking the time to research what it is that you're getting yourself into. And I did get myself into some trouble. The reason automatic writing is a no-no for the ARE is because they're concerned about possession. And when you look down here at the list of the differences between the two, you can well understand why. With soul writing, when you're getting a message in soul writing, you get the collective we. So you're getting the collective consciousness coming through. We are with you always in love and in light. That's always the salutation that I get when I first do this writing. Automatic writing, it's often the ego-based I. You're dealing with one singular entity. And so and often that one is not for your highest and best. It's a low level frequency to it. The soul writing is coming from within. It's coming from within your soul. The automatic writing is coming from an outside source. All right. So that I is dictating to you. Soul writing always includes a meditation prior to doing the writing. You don't write without it. Automatic writing, you could just sit down and start writing. I mean, you don't really think about it. You don't do any sort of meditative process prior to picking up the pen. With soul writing, you have a total awareness of what you're writing, so it's like no surprise when it's coming out on the paper. With automatic writing, you often have no awareness at all. You have no clue what you're writing, and all of a sudden when it's over and you go back and read it, you go, oh, what's that? Soul writing, you allow unconsciously watch the writing proceed, so you're aware of what you're writing. With automatic writing, it's often no control of your hand. It just happens by itself. I have noticed that when I'm doing, if I slip into automatic writing, because there were times when I was first doing this, I would get really kind of cocky and I'd say, I don't need to do meditation. I don't need to surround myself with white light. I'm always there. No, I wasn't. And there were times when the writing got really bizarre. It got very tiny. It went up at an angle. I could feel a difference in my arm. It was very strange. Soul writing, your handwriting remains basically the same as it does when you're in a conscious state. With automatic writing, it looks different. With soul writing, you always say a prayer of protection, surround yourself with white light. Actually, the two things that are most important with soul writing is the meditation and the prayer of protection. In my class that I teach on soul writing, I do go into great detail on how to set up a writing ritual, the ideal environment to do it in, and the step-by-step, but this is not what this workshop's about right now. So I'm just giving you an overview. And then finally, in soul writing, your soul is being guided. You're being gently nudged. But with automatic writing, you're often being directed or impelled to do something, like you will do this or something like that. So those are the basic differences between the two. Now, in my research project, it consisted of two parts. First was a traditional past life regression. I asked them to go to the lifetime that was most impacting them today, because you know you've had many, 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 many past lives, but you're not working on issues from all of them. You decided in your pre-life planning session that you were going to work on just a handful. Like Edgar Cayce, when he would give a reading, a life reading for somebody, and he revealed past lives, he would never give them more than 4. And I think at one point, Shirley MacLaine even said that she got cut off because she became like a past life junkie, and all she wanted was more and more information about her past lives. The idea of then adding the past life, the soul writing aspect of it was something that I decided to do because I had inadvertently stumbled upon this. I had gotten, this is also going to show my age, Diane. Dick Sutphin was one of my early mentors. He has since passed. And he had a ton of subliminal hypnosis tapes. And there was one that I bought. It was called Start Writing Now. And I bought it because I was a writer by profession in my other life. I worked in advertising, public relations, and marketing. And so I did a lot of commercial copywriting. And although I was really good at it, it didn't give me any sort of satisfaction. I thought, what is this? I want to write something deeper. So I bought this tape and I listened to it. And to make a long story short, the subliminal message was, you have a story to tell, you can tell it, and like just see it as a movie. And so I saw myself dressed in a long white shift with a little cap on my head, holding a candle, coming down some stairs, sitting at a desk, pulling out some parchment paper and sitting and writing. And what I ended up getting was diary entries from the 17 and 1800s. So it was my past life aspect who was sharing her diary entries with me. And I thought, this is really bizarre, because the way they read like some sort of a sophomoric historic romance novel. And I thought, I don't write like that. What is this? But anyway, I ended up getting, that went on for a couple of weeks. And then finally, my past life aspect wrote directly to me in one of those sessions and said, you know, pretty much outlined what it was I was supposed to be doing going forward. So I knew you could contact your past life aspect that way, but I didn't know that you could do it the way Frank DiMarco did it. Now, Frank DiMarco, maybe some of you know him. He was the co-founder of Hampton Roads Publishing Company. He sold his interest in it, moved to Charlottesville, where I live, and he started doing his own writing. And we became friends. We met at the Monroe Institute, and he wrote a book called Chasing Smallwood. In it, he described how early one morning he found himself sitting at the kitchen counter. He was drinking coffee. It was like 4 in the morning or something. And he was writing in his journal. But he said he was moving between his normal consciousness and an altered state in which he was able to allow someone else form the words. That someone else turned out to be Joseph Smallwood, who was a 19th century American who was a Union officer during the Civil War. And as it turns out, it was a past life aspect of Frank's. So while reading Chasing Smallwood, I couldn't help but compare Frank's experience to my own and noticed one important difference. So during the years that I was communicating with my past life aspect, when I was getting all those diary entries, we did not engage in an ongoing conversation with each other. It was just, you know, I'm going into this meditative state, putting the pen down, and then I'm getting this writing, and she's identifying it as April 12th, 1803. It was pretty much one-sided with me being on this. I was a silent witness to what she was writing about her life story. It never occurred to me to stop her by interjecting questions as Frank did with Joseph. And I have since added this as part of my, the very last part of my, no, that's the very last part. I teach a soul writing course now, a 3-day intensive. And one of the exercises is to do a past life regression. And then when you identify your past life aspect, to actually have a conversation. So you're talking to yourself, you're talking to your prior self, your past life aspect. So it's very fascinating, very fascinating. Because there are things in there that, you know, about the Civil War, about what life was like during that time, from the perspective of somebody who actually lived then. You can talk about revisionist history, right? If everybody remembered their past lives, there would be no revisionist history because we would remember things the way that they really were, not the way that historians have subsequently written about it. But for the sake of this project that I was working on, Frank agreed to be part of my research group. And he went back to a past life as Cleo. And this was the Pompeii life. In that life, he was a young male, thin, with an olive complexion. He was a tall, healthy teenager. He had coarse, dark hair. He wore leather sandals and a Roman robe made up of a rough gray material. He lived in the western part of southern Italy near Naples. He said there were no buildings in sight, but there was a cave nearby that he used for shelter or when he wanted to be alone or was on a vision quest. So Cleo was what they called a diviner in fire, meaning he was a prophet or soothsayer who gained insight into a question or a situation through a fiery ritual. He worked with a slightly older teacher to develop this ability. And his mentor taught him to use a burning image to keep his conscious mind busy as he went into an altered state of consciousness. While in that state, he could scan immediate time and space and get impressions about what was coming up. Those impressions were his finds, and his job was to share what he saw with the people of Pompeii. Well, when he was in his early 20s, Cleo prophesied that there would be a huge disaster at Pompeii. While he was recognized as a prodigy, he also was arrogant and much too young and inexperienced to know how to translate what he was seeing so that people could understand and accept his premonitions. He thought that by simply sharing his vision, the majority of Pompeii's 20,000 residents would believe him and immediately begin an orderly evacuation. But rather than listening to him and leaving, they stayed. They didn't take his warning seriously, and they thought, even if it were true, they had plenty of time to escape. So when Vesuvius erupted, the citizens of Pompeii realized the seriousness of the situation and they panicked. The resulting stampede was something that Cleo had not foreseen. Although he knew where to go to escape his own death, he was so overcome with guilt at having failed to convince the populace to leave that with death and destruction everywhere, his remorse was so unbearable that he no longer wanted to live. So rather than save himself, he went into the caves near the ocean and he stayed there with a crowd of people who suffocated with the clouds of toxic gases and ash as that quickly filled the cave. His last thoughts as his soul left his body, which is very important, by the way, in a regression session, because it often sets up the next lifetime. His last thoughts were that despite his training, his talent, and his position, he had failed his mission. He should have accepted responsibility for his gifts and used them in a less pompous way. If he had been humble, he would have come across as more sincere. Perhaps then he would have been believed and more lives would have been saved. Now, unbeknown to me, Frank suffered from asthma in this life. He did not make the connection between his death in Pompeii and the asthma in this life from simply the regression. He made it from the soul writing portion. When I asked him after the regression was over to ask his soul if there was any other information that he did not get in the regression that he needed to know, this is what he wrote. Asthma, the result of seared lungs. He said, breathing seems to have calmed down as we did the reenactment. No parents, orphan, no memory of them, seemingly no other life but serving. Too cocksure, plus too inexperienced. Regret, remorse, wasted training, cautious attitude, humility, caution, certainty, sureness in doing these things today. Afterwards, his symptoms completely disappeared. The asthma was gone. This happens a lot when you're working with physical karma. Many times the regression alone, uncovering the source of the symptom, the source of the discomfort or the chronic illness, will release it. When I did my other research on physical karma, about a little over 30% had a spontaneous healing. So it's very, 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 very powerful. Now, we went into this session to review the lifetime that was impacting Frank in the here and now. And his soul chose the one where he acquired a physical karma that was manifesting as asthma nearly 2,000 years later. You know, our bodies contain information that could be read like a karmic history book. So many physical conditions are often related to an event that occurred in a prior lifetime. So karmic manifestations are a true example of cause and effect of reaping what you sow. Spontaneous healings often occur simply when the root cause of the problem is uncovered. In his book, Through Time into Healing, Dr. Brian Weiss wrote, like migraine headaches, asthma, respiratory infections, and allergies are physical conditions in the current lifetime that seem to have origins in suffering experienced in previous lifetimes. Past physical trauma seems to have present physical residue. So why now? Why did it take 2,000 years? Well, Frank's working on this particular lifetime because guess what? He's doing the same work now that he did as Cleo. In other words, he is channeling spiritual information. He is putting it out in books. He is getting in front of audiences. And Spirit was saying to him, do not do what you did last time. Don't let that ego get in the way because it's very important that this message get out there and that people believe you. So put your arrogance and your ego aside, learn from what happened to Cleo, and you'll be fine. And that's exactly what has happened. So let's look at some other examples. I did a regression with Steve. He was a 69-year-old retiree. He went back to a lifetime in which he was in Rome, 301 AD. He said his name sounded like Leanne. I don't know that it was Leanne, but for the sake of this, that's phonetically the way it was coming out. She was a young woman in her 20s from a well-to-do Roman family. The significant event occurred when she was sitting in a VIP section at the Colosseum. She wanted to save a gladiator that she admired, but she got voted down. She talked a lot about the people around her. She was afraid they were going to kill her. This was the theme throughout the regression, that she was going to be killed because she was so outspoken and so rebellious and so discontent. She said, I don't like the way Rome is being run or anything about it. It's like a court with wealthy, powerful people all sucking up to the emperor. And she thinks she was going to be poisoned, or she was poisoned, or there was a conspiracy to kill her. But in the end, she ended up killing herself. Her final words from that lifetime was, I hate them. I hate what they stand for. I hate everything about them. They're all sociopaths. They care about no one but themselves. Now, in this life, Steve worked at a university, and he quit his job, retired early, because of the group of people that he was working with. So he starts describing the people he's working with in this life almost the exact same way he's describing the people in Rome. The people there, meaning the people at his job, were thoughtless, like the people in Rome. They did what they did without contemplating it. Not very real. One-dimensional people. They just don't care. They're almost some kind of benign sociopaths. Use that word twice. They just never gave up any thought to what they were doing. They just went through the motions. You couldn't talk to them. It was like talking to a wall. It had the same energy as the people in Rome, but not nearly as dark. Still, they were mindless with no real sense of regular people. Now, Steve's previous life and the information he acquired during the regression and the soul writing session gave examples of several karmic influences at work in this life. The first thing had to do with final thoughts at the end of one's life. That became the unfinished business, the summation of the woes or the pleasantries of the life just completed. So remember, Leanne was born into a group of souls, into that particular group of souls, whether she liked them or not, they were very much her peers. Yet within that soul group, she felt isolated and alone in her opinions. She admitted feeling discontented, and that led to a rebellious streak that her companions could not tolerate. So it was in this lifetime that Steve found himself in a group who exhibited nearly the same characteristics as its Roman counterpart. So predictably, Steve's criticism of them was the same as Leanne's was of her peers, going so far as to repeat the accusation that his current group was filled with sociopaths, just like the Roman group, admitting that they both had the same energy. So it's no wonder that this energy repeated itself in a group dynamic, because as we travel from one lifetime to the other, our souls tend to repeat patterns of behavior. We recreate the same setup we experienced before so that we could tackle a lesson we didn't complete in the previous lifetime. With this pattern in place, it's easy to understand why soul groups are attracted to each other to complete the unfinished business between them. So this group of people that were in Steve's life at the university that he was working with is the same group of people that were in his Roman lifetime. So they might be in different bodies, or circumstances are different, but the dynamic between them is identical. The issues between them were never resolved because Leanne committed suicide. She never finished that, resolved that karma from that life. And in this life, he resigned his job prematurely, and he didn't get to finish up with this group. So he's probably gonna meet up with these folks again. I want to talk to you a little bit about soul groups, since I've alluded to that already. I didn't expect this to happen, by the way. Could people mute their mics, because I'm getting feedback conversation. So during the regression sessions, I began to see what I called pods coming together. That's a group of souls who, despite being strangers in this life, were reliving similar events in similar time periods. So during the course of this project, I did not have just one, I had 3 soul groups appear. These individuals told stories that were eerily similar to that of other participants in the study, despite the fact that they never met in this lifetime. This phenomenon isn't anything new, certainly, as there have been many studies of group incarnations before. So I want to show you the 3 examples and how they, now remember, these people don't know each other at all. They all came to me to be part of this study. The first was Marion, who lived in 1203 in either England or Germany. She was a young Caucasian female. She described her life as precarious, at risk from men who roam the woods. She has twins, a boy and a girl. Only the girl, Anne, survives. And her comment was, it's better to be a boy in those days. She was hiding in a cave with her daughter, who at that point was 10 or 11 years old. She said, we're hiding from men with bad intentions. The pattern repeats until they're found and the girl is dragged away. Okay, that's number 1. The second one is Michelle, who lived in France in 1208 AD, 5 years later. Michelle is a past life aspect of Chris, who was a truck driver, came to the study. She was a young Caucasian female. She described life as happy and content. She talked about armored clad soldiers appearing. She feeds them, but they become drunk and they assault her. She defends herself. She killed one soldier and then she was killed. The third one, he couldn't come up with a name. This is a past life aspect of Boyan. He didn't know what his name was, but said it began with the letter D. So that's all I have. Again, D in Europe in 1280 AD. Young Caucasian female again. A group of soldiers came in and took a little girl around 7 years of age. He thinks he was the little girl who was taken. Now, what do they share in common? All 3 were young Caucasian females. All 3 lived in the 13th century from 1203 to 1280. All 3 lived in Europe. All 3 described fear of invading soldiers, and all 3 experienced a traumatic event at the hands of those soldiers. Now, I did a little bit of a comparison about how the past life was foreshadowing the current life. So now Jenny had the past life as Marion. Marion and her daughter Anne reincarnated as Jenny and her present daughter. Anne is dragged away from Marion and Marion never sees her again. Jenny's daughter in this life is dragged away by the police and sentenced to life in prison. I asked Jenny to do some soul writing about that life, and this is what she wrote. Forgiveness is what is needed in this life. I feel anger towards men who harm others in any way. I've seen the illusions and lies of systems in our country and world in this lifetime. I must forgive and let God handle it. I sense the same anger from my daughter. We both feel fear and anger from that life and have a lot to work out together, and we are. I put this in God's hands. I now understand why my daughter and I experienced this. I was not able to save this life either, but I know where she is and comfort her. I've had to work out my guilt for not rescuing her this time also. Looking at Michelle's life and how it has foreshadowed Chris's, Chris said that he has recreated architectural details in his home that were in Michelle's kitchen. And he didn't know this till he did the regression. Then he saw what Michelle's kitchen looked like. He has a strong reaction to individuals who have similar personalities as soldiers. He said, I can't stand people who act like soldiers, out of control, arrogant, dominating, no consideration. and braggers. And this was Chris's soul writing. The contentment was stopped by bad behavior. So unnecessary. Here we go again. How many times? When will the meetings be more direct? How to transcend the repetitive lives? Knowing isn't always the answer. It's all we can do. And then there's D, how D's life foreshadowed Boyan's. He experienced what it felt like to be a female who has no physical power. He experienced tremendous loneliness and said, I fought the fact I was female. And he did. He really did not. And I find that a lot with my male clients. If they go to a past life, which they're a woman, they have a hard time processing it. Whereas the women don't have any problem at all being men, because it's, we can feel what it's like to be in a very powerful, strong body. Anyway, he said, I fought the fact that I was female, discovering femininity. I wanted to be born as a man in this life to experience being male. The notion of being lonely, I was afraid when I was younger in this life to stay alone. And then this was Boyan's soul writing. He said, it was scary to admit I was a woman, strong enough to survive, but lonely, nobody to love. Where are others in that scenario? Where is love? When I re-experienced myself as female, I can tell I feel different understanding for women. Boy, was I brutal in my superiority of man. But being man or woman, it feels the same, no difference. We are all the same from inside. Now, I know everyone wonders about famous past lives. I've had my share of them, meeting people. Over the years, I've met a handful of individuals who had or thought they had a famous past life. Talking with a friend once, and we were discussing the odds of an individual having a historically recognizable past life, and she made a simple, yet very profound statement. Well, somebody had to be him or her. And that's certainly true. Nonetheless, you may ask, why then are there multitudes of Marie Antoinettes, Thomas Jeffersons, and Martha Jeffersons, and Napoleons and Cleopatras? When so many come forward to stake a claim to a famous past life, it becomes more of a metaphysical sideshow than legitimate past life recall. I once had a client who came to me saying she was sure she was Patrick Henry, and she based that on the fact that she, like Henry, was a talented orator. So she said, I like to talk, and so does he. Another woman claimed to have been Martha Jefferson because she had this strange sensation whenever she went to Williamsburg. And based on that evidence alone, these intelligent, well-meaning women decided they must have been that famous personality. The important thing to remember is that this lifetime is about this lifetime. When this life ends, you review what you accomplished in the here and now, not what you did in the there and then. That's already been reviewed. In this life, you already may be working out karma acquired from that previous life. How you handle situations that come up in this life is of primary importance. If you prefer to bask in the glory or hide in the shame of your past life, you do your present life and your soul a great disservice. In personally knowing the individuals who were famous, I can tell you from firsthand experience that they say this knowledge has not been an easy thing to bear in this life. This is especially true if they felt they were not living up to the potential their previous lives had earned, or if they couldn't live down some of the rather unsavory things that they did before. People mistakenly assume that when reviewing a past life, they will see a steady upward climb. In the Casey readings, he points out that souls make advances, but they often lose ground as well. The last book that I wrote, Edgar Casey and the Unfulfilled Destiny of Thomas Jefferson Reborn, is a good example of that. Casey did a reading on a 2-day-old baby in 1936 and said he was the reincarnation of Thomas Jefferson and Alexander the Great. And Casey also said that his soul was able to do for the world what Jefferson did for this country. Well, obviously that didn't happen. And I wanted to explore why. Why didn't that happen? And so that's what that whole book is about. If you're interested in that, I encourage you to read it. Gives you a little bit more insight into somebody who had a famous past life, and what they did or did not do with it. Now, I had a volunteer, her name is Barbara, She came to the study. She was very, very reluctant to give me any information. I pretty much had to pull it out of her. But she ended up telling me that she went to a past life in England in the 1500s. She was a middle-aged male. She did not give me her name. She did say it was in the British Isles. And then she said, feels like old times, strong church, old kingdom, medieval times, strong, big, ego king. Well, I immediately, as a historian, thought she must be talking about Henry VIII. She wasn't Henry VIII. She was a counselor in his court. She referenced repeated arguments. She said at first she was in favor of the religious persecution that Henry had initiated, then she was against it. She failed to convince the king to kind of knock it off, and as a result was executed. Her last thoughts were, how could this happen? Better keep quiet. I felt punished for speaking my truth. So this is Barbara's soul writing. And so we learn, is that not the point? You then, loving power, inconvenienced by truth, silent about truth, punishing others, withholding sustenance, controlling lives, deciding death, dying as lived and did under control of others. Also see there is truth. Rises unhidden inside, do not speak and betray oneself, and God speak and be punished. What is power? To have from others leads to loss integrity. To have from inside feels good, nourishes heart, reveals soul. Hold in or let out, does it matter? Yes. Hold back, why live? One's truth is oneself. Oneself as self or as expression of God. Don't forget that fire also creates light, and with light one is seen. One can be heard, never matter, only to speak, all are said enough. Then you might say to yourself, this is really kind of a bizarre message, but it meant something to her. You know, obviously she was having a hard time in this life to speak her truth. And because she was subconsciously remembering, the last time I did that, my head got chopped off. I'm not going to do that again. And this was encouraging her to go forward. Soulmates, one of my very favorite topics. Although sometimes I think our soulmates are actually our cellmates. Anyway, I want to tell you about one of these and how the soul writing helped with her. This is Vivian. She was a male in South Dakota, 1847. She identified her name as Albert Wilcox. She was a cowboy, worked cattle. At 31, marries Rebecca